Hello guys, my name is Amit Sani and I welcome you in this Daily Hindu announced video. In the morning these videos come, in the evening the MCQ lessons they come. So both the lessons you need to follow religiously. Today some important issues are there. The RBI reserves transfer, that is the most important issue, and we will discuss that in much detail. In 28th of August it is, and let's start the lesson. These are some words that I found today, and PDF you will get on the Facebook group and the Telegram channel there. So daily I tell you about that. Gift from RBI. This article important for GS paper 2 and 3. Why this is called as a gift? Because these reserves. You see, RBI has two types of important funds, like the economic capital and the reserve equity. Now, the biggest under that is the currency and gold revaluation reserve. That is the first category, and 6.91 lakh crore rupees are there right now. And sorry, this is the data for 2018 June, and these are the main chunks of the RBI reserves from where the money has been given to the government. The second part is the contingency reserve or the reserve equity. Now this is at 2.32 lakh crore rupees, and in that, the Vimal Jalan committee had recommended that out of your assets, keep around 6%, means 5.5 to 6.5% as the contingency reserve. You see, from 2010 to 13, around 32 to 45% of the gross income of RBI that was diverted towards the contingency reserves, because the reserve was very small. So it was needed, and during some emergency times, this was actually very much needed. And the country has seen some financial challenges in the past, so they were very much aware about those things. Now, after 14, they stopped giving any money to the contingency reserve, and then in 16 it started again. Now these all reserves, they are accumulated over many years. So it is not a accumulation of 1, 2, 3, 4 years. It's accumulation of many years. And from that, the money total 1.676 lakh crore rupees is given to the government of India. So now that's why it's a gift for government, because it's a huge money and they were anticipating a huge amount there. Now that amount is given to them, not according to their wishes, but this is a big amount that is given to them. So they have a huge responsibility now that these funds are not diverted, or these are not bridged in other shortfalls of any other reserves. And it's a moral responsibility now, because writer says that it's a morally unacceptable thing also, because India and the government, they are sovereign power wielding entities, and they can go for these reserve transfers. That's under their power and it is all legal. But morally it is unacceptable that any one government swallow even a part of such funds to help meet its expenditure in a particular year. Why? Because you see, out of 6.91 lakh crore rupees, these amount, and the 2.32 lakh crore rupees of the contingency reserve, they have taken 1.76 lakh crore rupees. So it's a big percentage there. Okay, and from the contingency reserve, out of 2.32, they have taken 52.6 thousand crore rupees. So these are huge sums which are given, and normally governments do not go for these transfers, because these are for some unexpected times, some financial challenging times, and where in 1990s we had these kind of times. So these are normally built up for those kind of phases. So is this economy of India today, is this going through the same kind of challenges? Because the official reports does not say anything like that. They say that it's all a bright picture and India is the fastest growing nation, and it's all great going on. Some challenges are there, but the suspicions and the reportings are more maligning the image of government, because the job losses and the problems in the industries and all, these are a kind of hype against the government. That is the official statement. But they are going for these reserves. So is this a kind of a challenging situation for the government that they are not telling us, or is it just a option for these times, because they are lacking the expenditure there. Government is not going for the expenditures and private investment is also stuck. So these reserves were the very option left, and it was announced in the budget speech that they will want those. They were actually having an eye on this particular fund, and at least half of the currency and gold revaluation reserves they were expecting, but this much money could not be allowed, and 1.76 lakh crore rupees are given to the government of India here. Okay, so that's a whole picture, and as I told you that these are huge and important funds. The economic capital saves from becoming insolvent, and the second fund is for the contingency times. As the time says contingency, in Constitution also in Article 267 we have contingency fund. In 266 we have Consolidated Fund of India. So if any emergency comes, then the money is taken from the Contingency Fund of India, and the funds are always kept at a same level. So whatever we take, we fill that gap from the Consolidated Fund of India, and that money which we take from Consolidated Fund of India, that we need to appropriate. So that means whatever we take from the Contingency Fund of India, ultimately we need to appropriate that. Means this will be well informed issue, this will be a well discussed issue, and that money is again going back to the Contingency Fund of India. So these kind of workings are there with the contingency funds, and this is for the RBI. RBI is the ultimate bank for the government, also the banker for the government, and the banker for the other banks too. So it has huge responsibilities, and it cannot fail. Means it must not fail in a sense, we must say. And if RBI is gonna fail, then it's a kind of a biggest problem for the economy. So everything is centered around RBI in the economy. So that's the issue. That much intensity and the importance is there for the same issue. And one big article is also there regarding the similar issue. Here now again in the next article they are talking about 370s issue, and 2 days back we discussed the article 356, how this went into some kind of a misuse here, that the president's rule was imposed according to a strategy. And yesterday in the article we discussed about the issue of ADM Jabalpur versus SS Shukla case, where Supreme Court in 1976 decided in a very problematic way, where they said that in the name of internal security, because the emergency period was going on at that time. So in that internal security issue phase, when court ruled in favor of the state, it said that personal liberty can be compromised there. So that was a very anti-constitutional move according to the writer. Here again Surit Parasarthi talks about the similar issue. So all these things are well discussed, we will not go into these details again. And here just one issue of article 367. You know, when 370 was removed, then it was according to the opinion of the governor there, and all these issues were based on the interpretation of the articles there. So article 367 talks about the interpretation of the articles of the constitution, and ultimate interpreter is the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court's decision is extremely important here. And here when the writer again talks about the learning of the history, that in the judicial history Supreme Court has given some caution about some issues, and about the issue of personal liberty also. Even in that case of 76 also, Supreme Court told that always the interpretation of the constitutional article will be very sensitive, and the caution must be taken by the state there. And any kind of restriction on the personal liberty will be a problematic thing. So a lot of caution must be taken in the future too. So 367 is important, 356 is important in this JNK case, 370 is important in this case, and that 35A is also very much important there. So the article talks about the well discussed issue, but different angles are coming. So please go through this article also and you will understand these things easily. Next article. You see, this article is not to be discussed here because it is a kind of opinion of the Russian ambassador Nikolai Kubashev. Here he talks about the history of World War II, and we are approaching the 80th year of the starting of World War II, because it was 1939 when the World War II started, the biggest war ever, and it was very unique one and a huge war, and way bigger than World War I, because nuclear bombs were used and all the bigger countries were involved, and the devastation that followed, that was unprecedented. And here the writer says that Russians were forced to get into this war because these Axis powers, they were very brutal. The Nazi Germany was taking over all these countries, and they were defying all the previous treaties and all. Here in the East, Japanese were very brutal. They took over China, they took over all these other countries, including Korea and all, and Mongolia they attacked, and they were about to capture Russia again, because Japan had defeated Russia in the starting of the 20th century also. So a lot of concerns were there, and the writer says that Russia was a new democracy at that time, and they were trying to get all their aims simultaneously, but this was a big provocation and then confrontation. In 1939, a stage for the global war was set by Nazi Germany. It had determined its aggressive policy by annexing Czechoslovakia, tearing apart the non-aggression pact with Poland, and denouncing the maritime treaty with Great Britain, and colonial claims they put there against Britain and France, because Britain and the France, two countries, they were the biggest colonizers, and Germany became brutal in the leadership of Hitler. So all these things are telling you some things about the history, the events that went by. So you should read this article. It is based on history, and it's an opinion of a Russian ambassador. So the Russia's point of view is taken here, and they are trying to tell that we were the innocent ones, but we were pulled in that war, and after that a lot of devastation that happened, and lakhs of soldiers and people, those were killed from their side. So now he says that a deliberate attempt is going on, where due to American pressure and all these the indirect wars which are going on, the trade wars, tariff wars, and these rivalries which are going on, so there is a drive to rewrite the history, falsify the history of the Second World War, according to the writer. And he says that real culprits who had those allegations there, and they are being whitewashed, and the countries which were pulled into that war and who were not the real culprits and who became victorious, they are being demonized. So this drive is going on to rewrite the history and falsify the Second World War, according to the writer here. So you must read that article. Next article is the article of the day, the development of financial institutions, which were announced by our finance minister in the press conference recently. On 23rd of August, she talked about those issues. You see, developmental institutions are not the new ones. They are well observed, well discussed, and they were there in the past also. In order to improve access to long-term finance, the main issue is the long-term finance. And that's why this article would be important for GS paper 2 and 3 both. Long-term finance is the biggest problem of the day. Government expenditure is not possible. Much expenditure is not possible. Private investment, they are putting all the stakes on, and they are expecting the $5 trillion economy dream to be fulfilled by the private investment, which is already stuck. So the industries, the infrastructure, the housing sector, all these issues, they need long-term financing. Long-term financing means 15, 20, 25, 30, 40 years financing. But who takes this risk? That's the biggest question, because first question is that from where these financings will come, who will take that risk, and there are uncertainties, and were these things in the past there or not? So in India, they had tried these things. In 1949, the first developmental financial institution was established, and later when ICICI came in 1955, it was prompted by World Bank. Today the ICICI Bank is running in India, and its parent organization was ICICI. So that became a huge phenomena in the terms of a developmental financial body. Later in 1964, the IDBI was established. So these were the bodies. At that time, capital market was not that much developed in India. So line of credits were given by RBI, and the condition on the commercial banks of these statutory liquidity ratios and all, these bonds and all, these funds were given to these bodies so that government can manage these financial bodies, because on their own they cannot sustain, because NPA risk is always there in the long-term financing, and these uncertainties in the economy, political stage of the country, and anything may change in 20-30 years. So that's a huge risk, because in today's fast changing times, things change very fast, and if we compare the situation of 1990s and 2019, then there is a huge difference. It is all a day and night situation. So that's why no agency want to take that risk, and for sure the private entities will not come forward, and always the government has to take this responsibility. So here again they are announcing about the development of financial institution. Background I have told you. Now all the important facts related with that. Writer says that financial institutions provide long-term credit. Low returns are there because not much interest they can earn with these long-term financing. As a country, we go for these World Bank financing and other ADB bank financing. So these are long-term funds. So these are the biggest sources for us. Like for the metro projects, we are taking help for ADB. Like for our dedicated freight corridors, we are taking help from World Bank and all these institutions. So these are the ultimate sources, because domestically we do not have these kind of financial institutions. So these are called term lending institutions, or DFIs, development financial institutions. Okay, these investments have social benefits, we all know about that, and uncertainties are also associated with that. So positivities are there, negativities are there. What are the positivities? Positivities are attached with the consequences, means what's going to happen with the long-term financing. Obviously the infrastructure, the housing sector, and all these industries which need long-term financing, they will flourish, because without that much funding these things are impossible. Like the case of railways, if in railways Britishers would not have invested that much money, then this growth in the railways today would not have been possible after independence. So the bases were created by Britishers only, and that was the long-term funding that was needed. Today if we imagine that banks will finance us for the railway projects, it is not possible. It could be it could have been possible only with the planning, and before that the base was created by Britishers. So that's the case. Now development banks are different from commercial banks. Commercial banks cannot go for these kind of fundings, because first of all these huge funds cannot be stuck for many years, and they are only going for short term and medium term maturities. So collectively both these are taking care of the economy. So developmental banks plus commercial banks, this duo is called Anglo-Saxon financial system, and in UK and US they have played a major role. If we talk about other countries, then industrialization of continental Europe and Asia was financed under the aegis of German type universal banks, okay, where long-term and short-term credit, both kinds of credits were available, and those were state sponsored. As I told you, state only can take that much responsibility and the risk. Alexander Grashenkron, the Ukrainian economist, he said something about a theory that greater the backwardness of a country, greater the role of the state to develop these bodies which will provide the long-term finance, because long-term finance develops the infrastructure in a country, and for country to progress, infrastructure is the prime need. So more backward is the country, more need is there for the long term financing, and that means that the bigger role of the state is required there. During the time of Great Depression, John Maynard Keynes, JFK, also told about these kind of institution, and it was felt that state intervention is needed because the capitalist idea failed at that time. So he said that National Investment Bank, this kind of bodies can be established by government, and that's going to help. In India, as I told you, first in 1949, the IFCI was established, first development bank, which was called Industrial Financial Corporation of India. Next, the ICICI Bank's parent body, the World Bank, prompted Industrial Credit and Investment Corporation of India. It came in 1955. 64, IDBI was set up as the apex body of all development financial institution. Now, they started working. Line of credit was given by RBI, SLR bonds were given for the financing, but a lot of non-performing assets in the upcoming decades, like in 70s and 80s, they created huge troubles, and that's why our economy in a way failed at that time, and we were on the brink of a financial emergency. But in 1991 we had to take some steps. IMF loan was taken, and at that time Narasimhan committee report told that these developmental financial banks, they are not viable and we have to disband them. So they were converted to commercial banks and they were disbanded, and that's why after that there was a steep fall in long term credit for a tenor of 10 to 15 years to 5 years. So it was a fall, and the loans which were available for 15-20 years, they came down to 5 years. So it was a great fall, and after that we had to go for these FDIs and all, and that was our condition that we needed to follow. If we see the China's story, then China's model is totally export oriented, and for the exports, all the infrastructure issue must be maintained, and for that they needed these kind of banks. So the growth story of China was written by these developmental banks, like the Agricultural Development Bank of China, China Development Bank, Export Import Bank of China, and they have been the forefront of the financing its industrial prowess. Germany's case is also here. Germany's development bank, KfW, had supported both kind of financing there, so long-term capital was made available. So these are examples from all over the world, and they have worked very well. So in India also they can work very well, but they were tried but they failed because of the bad management. Now again the announcement is there, but again the question is there that how it will be financed. Tell us the sources, and if the foreign private capital is expected to contribute in this equity capital, then it is going to be a risky idea. So the design of the governance structure is also a problem today, and it's a clear allegation on the government that their governance structure is fraught with dangers, and many interest groups are working there. They all want their own interests to be fulfilled there. So in this situation, it's a risky idea, and how they are going to flout these DFIs and how they are going to make them sustainable, that is to be seen, because commercial banks which give these short-term loans and medium-term loans, they are not getting their loans back. So how these DFIs will be viable, and who is going to take that risk? So that is to be seen here in the future. Okay, and we have to learn from the past mistakes and our learnings. So this is all in this article. Next article talks about a particular observation by the writers. They took two cases. One is of Mr. Dubey and one is of Miss Rajni. Mr. Dubey, they have their land, their farm, and they can collect all these woods and all and everything. So LPG cylinder, they were given under the Ujjwala scheme. Miss Rajni also given the Ujjwala cylinder there, but Miss Rajni does not have any land, and she is finding it very difficult to collect the woods and all, and every day to ignite the kacha chula there. So LPG gas cylinder helped her in the beginning, but now she is not able to refill them. So the monetary issues are there, and the wood is all free in villages. We all know about that. So they go for their collection. So Mr. Dubey, gave many excuses, and he explained the issue that exercise is a positive thing. Means when they go for these collections, these ladies, they go for collections, then they have their exercise, and it is helpful for the eyes. He said that it creates tears in your eyes, and your eyes are washed. So he explained this issue very positively, but actually he doesn't know that it affects the eyes, and many eye problems, they appear in the later stage. For the ladies who are cooking on the kacha chula there, the earthen brick stove. So that was the second excuse. Third excuse, he said that the food that is cooked on the kacha chula, that is way more delicious, and it is easily digestible. And the food prepared on the LPG gas stove, that creates indigestion. So these are the excuses. So when he could afford, still they are using the kacha chula there, and it is all a problematic situation for the females, because the males, they are not cooking there on the chulas. So that's why they are very easily explaining that issue, and females are bearing all the consequences there. And in this case also, the unaffordability is the case, and the second house is also using the kacha chula. So when we take all the cases, then 60% of the richest households, they are using kacha chulas, and they are not opting for the LPGs. So instead of that Ujjwala scheme, we are not observing the positive consequences there, and there are some issues against the cylinder use. So it is the part of their lifestyle, and the issue of having good food on the kacha chula, and the indigestion problem with the LPG cylinder stove food. So these are the huge concerns for the villagers. So that's why a proper advertisement is needed, proper awareness is needed, and the campaign like anti-tobacco style campaigns which were there regarding the tobacco, these kind of campaigns must be communicated, and they must be told that these fumes and these smokes which are coming out of these earthen chulas, they are very devastating. And most of these ladies in the later stage of their lives, they have many eyesight problems, the cataract problem, and all these are aggravated there. So this is not a good option, and they must be aware about the benefits of the cleaner fuel, that is LPG. Okay, so that's the case, and this is all a story. And the writer suggests here, these campaigns are gonna be important. Next issue is of the affordability. 75% people are covered under the Food Security Act, so they must be given LPGs on some lower rate. And the 10% of the extremely poor people, the poorest of the poor, which are covered in the Antyodaya Yojana, which are given some extra food there on a very cheap rate. So the LPG cylinders must be made available to the poorest of the poor people with much more lower rates. So this is how they are going to adopt these cylinders, because the affordability issues are always there. Because we think that these are subsidized cylinders and all, but you know that at one time they need to go for 1,000 rupees, and then they will get the subsidy back after some time. So at that particular time, when the cylinder is emptied suddenly, then they need that money, and later that availability of the cylinders and that supply, that is also a concern. So that's why the affordability and the supply issues, they also must be maintained here. So these are the